to show itself for the world, just like Beijing, just like the Seoul Olympics in 1988 showcased South Korea, and then South Korea took off. An extremely important event for the Chinese. Everything has to go well. But they had an issue, a PR issue. If you were organizing the Beijing Olympics, what would be your biggest PR nightmare? Or one of the biggest PR nightmares? What's your biggest marketing problem if you're the Beijing Olympics? Yes? Everything from terrorism to language problems and so on. But one of the biggest problems they had, if you're China, that is the problem of Tibet. Agree? What would the Beijing Olympics be all about? It's going to be about Tibet, how China is not taking care of Tibet. And if you're Beijing, you don't want that. So how can you avoid that when the Beijing Olympics starts, everyone talks about Tibet? And they did the smartest PR stunt I've seen in a long time. They decided to make the longest torch relay ever done for the Olympics. They went to so many countries, it was 18 months or something, and they knew what? They knew that every time the torch would come to a new country, what would people do and what would media write about? They would write about China and Tibet. And China knew 18 months of this, and people would be so sick of Tibet, so when the games start, no one would talk about Tibet. And think about it. What did we talk about during the Beijing Olympics? How wonderful the games were. Nothing about Tibet. Now, if you're China, you're really smart. You know which country is the biggest problem when it comes to PR and Tibet. Well, the French. The French love to demonstrate, they love to argue, and they are very particular about Tibet. So what did China do when the torch came to Paris? They sent a woman in a wheelchair to roll the torch down Champs-Élysées. And the French couldn't stop themselves. They attacked her. And suddenly the PR story was 100 degrees different. Suddenly media was writing about how can you attack a woman in a wheelchair? Smart. Now what happened in China? Chinese became furious. How can you attack our torch? How can you attack a woman? And how can you attack a woman carrying a torch in a wheelchair? Chinese go crazy. Huge debates on the internet. Boycott French companies. Boycott Carrefour. Carrefour started to sweat. And Carrefour sent out a press release saying, we are not a French company. We are a grocery store. We would do nothing to hurt the Chinese people. Because Carrefour used to be a French grocery store. But today, Carrefour is not a French grocery store. Yes, they're still their largest market. Yes, they have a lot of employees in France. But no, there's zero growth happening there. They're closing stores down, for God's sake. Where's the growth happening for Carrefour? China, Mexico, Pakistan. Now, if you're the CEO of Carrefour, what sense does it make to define yourself as being a French grocery store? Nothing. What sense does it make to define yourself as being a grocery store? Everything. Because suddenly, now, a Pakistani who works for Carrefour can say, what is the brand values of Carrefour? Do they resonate with me? And if they do, I am part of Carrefour. You can be part of Carrefour. You can never become French. That's the reason you should do it. So let me summarize this part. Now there are some people, when they hear me talk about that, they say, oh, come on, you can't say this. You can't forget where you come from. Roots are important. Look at Singapore. No history, no culture. It's very, countries that doesn't have a history don't know who they are. People who don't have roots are easily manipulated. And companies that doesn't have a history or a legacy, it's impossible to build a brand that stands for something. This all makes sense. But the problem with that argument is that you're using a metaphor to describe it, but you're using only half the metaphor. If you are going to use the metaphor of roots, the metaphor you're talking about is trees. And yes, it is true that a tree that doesn't have any roots is going to die. A tree that doesn't have any roots is going to flicker over and die. Or if there's a storm, it will fall. All of this is true. But my point is, it is equally true that a tree that doesn't have any branches also dies. The purpose with the branches of the tree is to stretch out as far as possible so that we can get as much light, as much energy from the sun and pick all of that up into our leaves so that the tree grows. It is dangerous to be rootless. It is equally dangerous to be branchless. For a country, for a company, and for a person. And what global companies are doing is that they're realizing that if we are focusing more on taking the energy from all branches, regardless where they come from, if we are McDonald's and we have the best idea coming from Indonesia, we should pick that idea up from Indonesia and implement it in America. That's how a global company would think. A lot of companies don't think like that, and that is their problem. And those are the companies that are stressed right now. Those are the companies, American companies or German companies or Swedish companies that go to China and say there's no innovation in China. They don't know how to innovate. They don't know how to think creatively. And they quit as soon as they get another job. They are coming with their Western way of thinking and trying to do it in the East. It might work, but it won't be perfect. A global company are the company that goes in and say, this is who we are, this is our brands, and if you have the same values as I do, you should work here. And those are the companies that say, we have amazing creativity coming out from Asia. We have really creative R&D centers in China, and people don't quit. They stay with us forever. It's a mindset. Now, this is not only a mindset. We'll do it at the end. This is not only a mindset for companies, it's also a mindset for people. So the last few minutes, I would like to talk about not what this means for brands, and why I believe that people who live in Pakistan have the potential to be the most creative people